always surprised at the way God works. I'm always surprised at where these moments where God speaks and I know I've got to preach a sermon on a topic come from. On Tuesday mornings, I gather with a number of our church members at Jumbo, because Tuesday is what at Jumbo? It's senior day. And so anywhere from 5 to a dozen to 15 of our church members are there from 9 to 10 o'clock or 10:30 on Tuesday mornings. And so I go and sit down with Rex and a couple of other people and just laugh and drink coffee and chat. And now they eat donuts, but I don't. But anyway, we sit and we talk about whatever is on people's minds that day or whatever is on the news that day. This past week, Rex asked me a hard question. A question that I actually gave me pause and began to think about, and I knew that we needed to talk about it here. That question is, how do you forgive somebody who has done something truly terrible to you, harmed you, hurt you in a very real sense? And as I sat there and thought about that, I realized that's a very, very good question. I warned Sandy and TJ and Scout that I was going to talk about this today because it is one of those things that is truly and profoundly hurtful to our family. Just about 6 years ago, 5.5 years ago, our family experienced the loss of Sandy's first cousin, Mandy. She was murdered by her boyfriend. I was still serving in Cherokee at that time. I've struggled all week long to try to remember what was going on that day. I'm pretty sure it was a Friday, and Sandy and I were both off, and we were headed to go do that thing married parents do. We were going shopping without our kids. The phone started ringing very early. We were not maybe 10 minutes outside of Cherokee, and we got the news that Mandy had been killed. We immediately changed directions. I called one of our elders and a dear friend of mine, Jim, and his wife, Rosella, and said, can you please, please, please pick the kids up from school? We will not be back in time. Told him what was going on, and Jim said, don't worry about it. We will take care of it. That we will take them to the football game tonight. They will be fine. If they need to sleep at our house, they will be fine. Jim and Rosella were almost 80 at that point, so they are a lovely couple who just made life amazingly fun. Anyway, this all began about 8 o'clock Friday morning when Mandy didn't show up for work. Her boss called Mandy's house, no answer. She called Mandy's mother, and obviously Mandy's mother was a little bit disturbed by this and sent Emily, Mandy's younger sister, to go find out if Mandy was sick. You don't ever immediately go to, oh my gosh, my daughter's been murdered. Surely she's sick and needs something. When Emily arrived at the house, all of the car doors of Mandy's car were wide open and it looked like it had been ransacked. She went and banged on the door. She called. She yelled out. No answer. Things were becoming more urgent. I tease Emily. Emily is probably 5'1", maybe on a good day, in heels. And I tease her and remind her that she's really like 4'11", but that's okay. But this little ball of fire kicked in the solid wood door of Mandy's house trying to get to her sister. What she found there was truly horrible. Mandy had been shot in the head and killed by her boyfriend. As Sandy and I were driving that morning, all we could think of was getting to Emily. I don't share this story with you so that you will realize how terrible this was. And make no mistake, it truly was horrible. I share this so you will understand my basis for this sermon on forgiveness. This past week, I was at Remind and Renew, and Dr. Pittman asked the question, who was here speaking just a couple of weeks ago, asked the question if there was still room for prophetic preaching in the church today. Or have we gone so far that all we want to hear are things that make us feel good and be happy that we were in church? Forgiveness is not one of those topics. Forgiveness is not easy. It is painful, trying, and often gut and soul-wrenching. And yet, forgiveness is paramount. I would tell you that forgiveness is not about the person you are forgiving. It's about the person doing the forgiving. After this morning's 8 o'clock service, Jerry came and told me about a man he had heard speak who had been a POW for 8 years, and it sparked a memory, brother. He said as he was, that man that Jerry had heard speak said as he was leaving that POW camp, he turned and said, "I forgive you." He knew he could not carry this burden of what had been done to him the rest of his life. And that memory was one of John McCain saying those exact same words. Senator McCain, as he left POW camp, said, "I cannot carry this burden. I have to forgive." One of the books I read in seminary is called Night. I don't recommend books lightly, especially not this book. But if you want to hear a story of forgiveness, Night is a story of forgiveness. It's written by a man named Eli. He was a member of not one, not two, but 3 concentration camps under Nazi Germany. He survived. And he said, "I cannot carry this burden. It will destroy me. I must forgive." I can honestly say I didn't forgive this man that shot Mandy for a long time. I was angry. I was hurt. I probably hated more than I want to admit. This wonderful light that he had snuffed out was someone that I loved dearly, someone my wife helped raise, someone who, on one of her visits to our home, she would come and spend the weekend with her sister, took our children to the Quick Stop and said, "Okay, whatever you can carry out of here, I will buy you." Now, my children were actually on their best behavior that day. They got one thing. And Mandy said, no, you're not trying hard enough. You could say I was angry, probably more than a little vengeful. But we'll come back to that. Matthew 18:21 through 35 is our text today. Listen to the words of the Gospel of Matthew. Listen to the story that Jesus tells, and may it challenge your heart. Then Peter came to him and said, "Lord, how often should I forgive my brother's sin against me? How many times? 7?" And Jesus said to him, "I do not say that you should forgive 7 times, but 7 times 70. And then he told Peter and the disciples a parable. "Therefore, the kingdom of heaven may be compared to a great king who wished to settle accounts with his servants. When he began to settle them, one was brought before him that owed him 10,000 talents. Now, I know we don't have a real good idea of how much money that really is, but you wouldn't be mistaken to think maybe $100 million. This is a lot of money. And since he could not pay his master, he was ordered to be sold with his wife, with his children, and all that he had, so that the king might be repaid. The servant fell on his knees, imploring him, 'Have patience with me. I will pay you everything.' Out of pity for him, the master of the servant released him, forgave the debt, and said, 'Go But then that servant came out of the king's presence and found another fellow servant who owed him money, 100 denarii. He seized him and began to choke him, saying, "Pay me what you owe." So his fellow servant fell down, pleading with him, "Have patience. Have patience with me. I will pay you." But this servant refused, and he had the man put in prison until the debt was paid. When this man's fellow servants heard what had happened, they were greatly distressed, and they reported what had happened to the king. His master summoned him and said, "You wicked servant, I forgave your debt because you pleaded with me. How could you not then show mercy to your fellow servant as I have shown mercy to you?" May God's word bless you today. Chapter 18 of the Gospel of Matthew is an intriguing book. It begins with Jesus telling his disciples, asking him, "Who will be the greatest in your kingdom?" That's not an auspicious start, just FYI. They clearly do not get Jesus. And before we get too excited about that, we tend to not get Jesus either, but we'll come back to that. But the question clearly shows that they are still struggling with who Jesus is and what his message is. Jesus talks about the temptation to sin and how we should try to avoid it, the lost sheep, and how God rejoices when one is found. And then Jesus talks about us failing each other, how we are to deal with it when church people, our siblings in faith, hurt us, our brothers and sisters hurt us, and how we are to deal with it. And it is in response to this last question that Peter asks his question, how many times should I forgive? I have to believe, at least with 2,000 years of hindsight, that Jesus almost had to sigh profoundly every time one of the disciples asked one of these questions like this. Who will be the greatest? But Jesus responded with love and grace both times. Because he loved, because he forgave. He knew they didn't understand. And again, before we get too excited about ourselves, with our relationship with God and with Jesus, and with our 2,000 years of seeing the disciples failing left, right, and center, we also sometimes miss the point. You don't have to look very far into the history of the church to see that church people don't always get it. We have fought wars over religion. We have killed in the name of God. We have split churches and whole denominations over who was right about how to worship. It's happening right now with our United Methodist brothers and sisters. It happened to the Christian church disciples of Christ at least 3 times in the last 50 years. According to my church history course, it happened the day we decided to become a denomination. Half of our churches walked out over a name. We forget that we have to forgive each other. We forget that we are a people called together. We are God's ecclesia, a people called into one body. Each of us brings different life experiences, different embedded beliefs. Each and every one of us has a different relationship with God. And we will never be on exactly the same page and exactly the same place in our relationship with God as every other person in this room. We won't be. We are going to bump into each other. We're going to bump into each other's rough edges. Being church means we are intentionally vulnerable to each other. And it is vital that we forgive. Let's go back to Mandy. We've not said the name of the man who killed Mandy in just about 5.5 years. Scout gave him a nickname that most of our family tends to use, and it's devolved now down into initials. However, Lofton Gray was his name. It took me years to reconcile my feelings over what happened. I was hurt. My wife and children were hurting. Our whole family stunned. All of us in different places and different stages of griefs at different times. And I can be honest and say I was angry and had more than a little bit of hate in my heart. But what I realized is those feelings were harming me. Just like Eli said, just like Senator John McCain said, I could not carry this burden. I needed to lay it down. Lofton was sentenced to life in prison plus 30 years without the possibility of parole. I don't think my anger, my hurt, my frustration meant anything to him. So I began to pray. I began to read about forgiveness. I preached on forgiveness a number of times over that next year as I was processing my own feelings, my own beliefs, trying to understand what God wanted me to learn from this. It's one of the reasons I'm so excited about our Bible study on suffering. So when Rex asked me this question last week, it brought many of these feelings back. And I asked myself these questions again, over and over again. Now, as the parent of a teenage girl, I ask her lots of questions. She gets frustrated with the number of questions I often ask her. But as is true of most teenagers, she tends to get crossways with her friends. She gets angry or frustrated or hurt over something somebody has said or done. And one of my favorite questions to ask her is, who is your anger helping? And the flip side of that is, who is your anger hurting? Does your friend even know you're angry, that you're hurt or confused? Usually the answer is no. So I ask again, who are your feelings hurting? They're only hurting you. Back to Lofton. Don't make any mistake, I was hurting. We were hurting, angry, frustrated. Did he care? Probably not. You see, once Lofton was convicted, he was sentenced and sent to prison in a very, very dangerous place. They were in the middle of a race riot that had been going on for the better part of a year and had a number of people killed. So my guess is he had his hands full just trying to survive. And then I began to think about his mother. She was at every day of the trial. She was devastated by not only what he had done, but his conviction. And as a parent, I can totally understand and sympathize with what she had to be going through. I can't even imagine how hard this must have been for her. And so I began to pray for her. I think this may well have been the first step in learning to forgive him. As I watched this mother suffer through the actions of her child, I began to realize how much pain Lofton had caused so many other people, other than just our family. And so I continued to pray. I ended up realizing that forgiveness is not about the person who wronged you. It is about the condition of your heart, your relationship with God. Mickey said last week, forgiveness is not about saying it's okay or what happened is okay. It's not about them getting away with what they did. There are always consequences to our actions. Forgiving them is realizing that we all need God's grace. We all need God's forgiveness. And grace cannot be earned. As Bill Masters and I were talking one day, he told me a story about getting a ride back from Colorado, and the man who drove him, Bill had offered to pay him for driving him back. And the man told Bill, "This is a gift. You can't pay for a gift." I know that's a summation, brother, but it's close. You can't pay for a gift. God forgave us while we were yet sinners, Paul wrote, Romans 5:8. Think about that. While we were yet sinners, God, enemies of God, one translation writes, God forgave us. God's forgiveness is a gift. We can't earn forgiveness. We can't pay for that gift. So when we challenge someone to earn our forgiveness, we're doing it wrong. Our example is one from God where we must learn to live into loving and extending that same grace God has given us. Because we are just as dependent on God's grace as is the person who has harmed us. How could we fail to forgive when God so richly forgives us? The parable of Jesus spoke clearly to this. The servant forgiven his massive debt and yet turned his anger and hate onto his fellow servant. We must learn to live into this call to love and forgive. This week's lectionary text was one of my favorite sermons, or one of my favorite texts. It was Micah 6:8. And the Reverend Dr. Elisa Davidson, one of my professors at seminary, retranslated that into a question and answer. And she said, "What does the Lord require of us? To make justice happen, to love passionately as God loves, to remember you are not God, but you are God's image in this world." If we're going to live into being God's image in this world, we have to forgive. We have to extend that same grace and mercy that God extends to us. We must celebrate that we are willing to forgive. We must celebrate and live into this call. My hope and prayer this week is that as you go out from this place, you will be God's image in this world. An image of love, an image of grace, an image of mercy and forgiveness. Would you pray with me? Most precious and holy God, thank you. Thank you for loving us. Thank you for abundantly forgiving us. For challenging us. live more fully into your love, into your grace, into your mercy. As we go out from this place, may we remember that we are your image in this world, that we have been gifted with the most amazing love, the most amazing grace, the most amazing forgiveness. And may that light our way. And may we live more fully into that example. In the precious name of Jesus we pray.